Welcome to Principles of Ecology. Today, we are going to explore the fascinating journey of energy as it travels through the natural world. We will uncover how life sustains itself, from the bright, sunlit leaves of a forest canopy down to the hidden, bustling world beneath our feet. By the end of this lesson, you will understand the fundamental pathways that connect every living and dead organism on Earth. Let us dive in. To begin our journey, let us look at the most familiar pathway of energy, the grazing food chain. Think of a rabbit eating grass and a hawk catching that rabbit. This chain always starts with living photosynthetic organisms, which we call primary producers. These plants capture solar energy and turn it into chemical energy. Herbivores then graze on these living plants, and carnivores follow by hunting the herbivores. The defining feature here is that the energy source is direct, living plant biomass. Now that we understand what the grazing food chain is, let us look at why it is so critical. This pathway is the primary mechanism by which solar energy enters the biological world. Without it, the sun's massive energy would be completely inaccessible to animals. In aquatic ecosystems, like oceans, this is actually the dominant pathway for energy flow, supporting massive fish populations. Furthermore, it acts as a natural regulator. Without herbivores grazing, plants would overgrow and rapidly deplete the soil of its nutrients. This brings us to an important question. How much energy actually makes it from one step to the next? To answer this, ecologists use the concept of ecological efficiency, often called the 10% rule. The formula is E equals E sub n divided by E sub n minus 1, all multiplied by 100. Here, E is the ecological efficiency percentage. E sub n is the energy available at the current trophic level, like our herbivores. E sub n minus 1 is the energy at the previous level, the plants. If E sub n increases, the organism is highly efficient at converting food into body mass. If it is small, most energy is lost as heat. Before we move on, let us see this with a concrete example. Suppose a field of grass captures 10,000 joules of energy. A population of grasshoppers eats this grass, and their ecological efficiency is exactly 10%. We want to find the energy successfully converted into new grasshopper biomass. We take our initial plant energy of 10,000 joules and multiply it by the efficiency of 10%, divided by 100 to make it a decimal. The result is 1,000 joules. This physically means that 9,000 joules were lost to the environment as heat and waste, which is why food chains cannot be infinitely long. Now that we have used this formula to find the grasshopper's energy, let us understand exactly where that calculation came from. We are setting out to isolate the energy at the current level, E sub n. We start with our base ecological efficiency equation. By dividing both sides by 100, we convert the percentage back into a usable decimal fraction. Then, we multiply both sides by the energy of the previous level, E sub n minus 1. This mathematical rearrangement perfectly mirrors the biological reality. We are scaling the massive pool of plant energy down to the fraction that the insects actually retain. So we have seen how energy flows through living plants, but what happens to the leaves that fall, or the animals that die? This brings us to the detritus food chain, nature's ultimate recycling facility. Instead of starting with fresh green plants, this pathway begins with dead organic matter, known as detritus. The primary consumers here are detritivores, like earthworms and woodlice, alongside decomposers, like bacteria. They extract energy from the dead matter. These cleanup crews are then eaten by secondary consumers, like birds or frogs, which links this hidden world back into the larger animal community. Understanding what the detritus chain is helps us see why it is arguably the most important energy pathway in terrestrial ecosystems like forests. In a typical forest, more than 90% of the plant matter produced is never eaten by herbivores. It simply dies and falls to the ground. Without the detritus food chain, the nutrients locked inside those dead leaves would be trapped forever, and the soil would quickly become barren. By breaking down this dead matter, decomposers release vital nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus back into the soil, acting as a natural fertilizer for new plants. This massive recycling effort leads us to calculate exactly how much energy enters the soil. We use the detrital energy flow formula. E sub D equals NPP minus E sub G. Here, E sub D is the energy available to the detritus food chain. NPP stands for net primary production, which is the total new plant biomass created in an area. E sub G is the energy grazed, meaning the portion eaten alive by herbivores. Conceptually, this just means whatever is not eaten alive eventually dies and feeds the decomposers. If herbivore grazing decreases, detrital energy increases. Let us apply this formula to a real-world scenario. Imagine a highly productive temperate forest. The trees generate a net primary production of 50,000 kilocalories per square meter per year. A survey shows that herbivores consume 5,000 kilocalories of these living leaves. We want to find out how much energy bypasses the herbivores and enters the detritus chain. We simply subtract the 5,000 kilocalories eaten from the total 50,000 produced. The final answer is 45,000 kilocalories. Physically, this means a staggering 90% of the forest's energy flows through dead leaves and soil organisms, proving that decomposers are the true engines of the forest. Now that we have explored both pathways, we must realize that nature does not work in isolated boxes. This brings us to the Y-shaped food chain, also known as the universal model of energy flow. In any real ecosystem, energy flows simultaneously through both the grazing and detritus pathways. The base of the Y represents the primary producers, capturing solar energy. From there, the energy splits into two arms, one to the grazing herbivores and one to the detritivores. Crucially, this model highlights crosslinks. Predators often eat prey from both pathways, and all organisms eventually die, contributing to the detritus arm. Building on the structure of the Y-shaped chain, let us discuss why this model is absolutely essential for ecologists. It provides a highly realistic and complete picture of ecosystem dynamics. It corrects the false assumption that environments are driven solely by large, visible animals. By mapping both pathways together, we can better predict how disturbances will affect an environment. For instance, if a chemical wipes out soil detritivores, the Y-shaped model shows us that the grazing chain will eventually collapse too, because the plants will run out of recycled nutrients. Life and death are completely interdependent. Let us look at this unified system visually. At the bottom center, you see the green box representing primary producers, the foundation of the entire system. Notice how the solid black arrows split upward into a Y shape. The left arm leads to the grazing food chain, supporting herbivores and carnivores. The right arm leads to the detritus food chain, supporting decomposers. Pay special attention to the dashed arrows. One dashed arrow points from the grazing chain over to the detritus chain, representing dead herbivores. Another dashed arrow points from the detritus chain back to the grazing predators, showing how a bird might eat an earthworm. This diagram perfectly captures the interconnected flow of energy. We have covered a tremendous amount of ground today. Let us review the 3 most important ideas. First, the grazing food chain handles the immediate consumption of living plants and is the primary entry point for solar energy. Second, the detritus food chain processes the massive volume of dead organic matter, acting as nature's vital recycling system. Finally, these 2 pathways are not separate. They combine to form a unified Y-shaped network of energy flow with constant crosslinks. You now have a complete, realistic picture of how energy travels through and sustains the incredible diversity of life on Earth.